everyone. Thank you for joining us again in this Video Analytics One-on-One podcast. Today, I'm super happy to have Mats Thulin here with me. Mats is the Director of Core Technologies over at Axis Communications. But today, it's really not about products, but it's really about talking about technology and the history and AI and where we are going in the security industry. One specific reason why it's great to have Mats here, it's really a pleasure, is because if we look around the security industry, there are probably a few people that are so deep into what AI can do in our security industry, where we are today and where we are going. As being somebody responsible for this topic in one of the biggest manufacturers in the industry, obviously has a very good overview into what is happening. And he's joining us today from down under in Melbourne. So thank you, Mats, for taking this time, probably also at a difficult time during the day right now for you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. It's really nice being here. And it's quite empty and quiet in the office, so it's perfect.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's the time for you right now?
9 o'clock in the evening.
9 o'clock in the evening. Okay. Well, we won't make this short because I want to hear everything. So maybe let's start off a little bit of how you got into this field. Where did you come from? What did you do academically? How did you get excited about computer vision, video analytics, AI? And what was your journey from where you started to where you are today?
So actually, my background is actually from hardware. So I spent most of my career working with ASIC design and doing sort of the hardware part of this. But of course, doing advanced ASIC design, you need to have a close collaboration with algorithm development as well. So that's sort of my background. Actually, I remember in doing my master thesis, I actually did one silicon neuron in an analog design. And that was like 30 years ago. So. But after that, over the last 8 to 10 years, I've been more and more moving into the field of AI. And, since deep learning technologies came close to the edge devices, and doing acceleration for analytics and deep learning is crucial in today's devices and cameras.
So you really came from the hardware side, where you probably did first deep learning and computer vision on the embedded side, and that's how you moved into the field.
Well, actually, in our OutPick devices, before we had deep learning acceleration, we had hardware acceleration of older computer vision algorithms as well, the more traditional computer vision as well.
Yeah, of course. And I think one thing is important to note as well, just because there is like cool new deep learning or machine learning doesn't mean that the field of computer vision is gone. It's just one of the technologies that we use. And I'm pretty sure there are many other traditional computer vision methods still around because it would just make a lot of sense.
And also, I think as the field matures and we realize that we need to do it more efficient and conserving power in embedded devices, we can't afford to run all of the large deep learning models. We need to combine computer vision with deep learning acceleration as well.
Yeah. Today, as I mentioned, today you're director for core technologies. Can you give us maybe an idea what that includes? I guess it's a lot of video analytics, but maybe not only.
So I'm heading up 4 teams working within R&D, but with long-term technology development. So my teams are focusing on both bringing new technology into the R&D organization, but also developing acceleration which goes into the ASICs. So we're part of a long-term technology development, and then feeding that both knowledge as well as algorithms and platforms into the product organization. So today I'm heading up machine learning. So I'm heading up 4 teams. 2 of the teams are focused on analytics and AI technologies. The other one is focused on video compression. I guess you're familiar with the SIP stream technology. That's one of the teams. And the 4th team is more focused on system level aspects, cybersecurity aspects, bandwidth, system level aspects. Okay. I think the collaboration between the technology areas is crucial. because you can't do niche design. You need to look at the system level at the same time. We
Yeah.
try to sort of create a good cross collaboration between the teams and doing cross functional work as well.
What I also find interesting is that you have this concept of rather looking to the mid and long term. So
Yeah.
I guess this also gives you and your team the freedom to explore more advanced technologies that don't have to be in the product tomorrow, but maybe like next year or in a few years from now.
Yeah, and also, I mean, sometimes when you encounter my teams, they spend part of their time trying to catch up with research, both from reading papers and trying to reproduce findings in papers. Sometimes when you try to sort of bring in that the research papers and do test with them on real use cases in real scenarios, you find that they are very niche. So finding out sort of what kind of advances makes a difference in our use cases, and then bring that into the products. It's a tricky balance, and then you need to have sort of the resources to try out a lot of things. And some of the things are really useful, and some we just push aside.
Yeah, I have the feeling also, looking at publications that are coming out in state of the art, that a lot of things naturally are not built for our industry.
No.
The data sets are different, the use cases are different. Generative AI that we'll talk about later maybe has less relevance so far. So it's not so easy to really find the latest state of the art that's really relevant to our security
No,
industries. I
definitely.
completely agree. Um, Okay, but staying with your current role, without sharing anything confidential, and also without like doing like promoting. The idea is not to promote any products here, but can
No,
you
no.
give us maybe a rough idea on what you're working on, or what's the current interest right now that your teams are looking into?
So my teams, of course, we're looking at video analysis as well as audio analysis, and with the advances we've seen in deep learning and with transformer structures, it's an exploding field, and it's really difficult to see what areas are relevant in this. And of course, vision transformers is an area which we are exploring. I mean, the recent releases and research published, we have much higher accuracy in doing segmentation, doing instant segmentation. But also, I think in the large language models, we're getting closer to a point where we start to get contextual understanding into the models. This is early stages, but I mean, doing things like scene classification, for example. A couple of years ago, it was really difficult to classify a scene if it was an indoor scene, an outdoor scene. Today, with the context understanding you're much closer to getting a real good understanding of what's in the scene. And if you add that to segmentation, trying to understand what is happening in the scene. So we're getting closer to both behavior analysis as well as the basic context understanding, which is a good fundament to build analytics moving forward.
Yeah, I was recently having a discussion about the clip paper from OpenAI.
Yep,
That's really about combining text and scene understanding and text prompts on a scene.
of course.
So I think there's still a long way to go and really cool features that we could add, of course, towards investigation, but also many other use cases in security.
And I think we part of the trick is to find the use cases which are not sensitive to for example, misclassifications or so doing forensic search, for example. Today it's much it's quite possible to do text-based forensic search. because that's not a critical area. But if you do an alarm in a critical scenario, then you're very much more sensitive, both to missed alarms as well as false alarms. So I think you need to have an understanding of the use cases you're trying to address and find the non-critical use cases, and that's where we can build the technology.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree, and there are at least two different levels of sensitivity, if not more. You can go into operations, maintenance, forensic
Definitely.
search. There's so many different levels where you need to have different kinds of false positive or false negative rates, of course. Yeah, so you mentioned segmentation. I was wondering, do you already see segmentation today in today's products in the security industry? Because traditionally that's very processor heavy, right?
Well, both. I mean, we currently don't do segmentation in the products, in the embedded products, but I think the first step to do segmentation would be for install wizards, so that you don't need to do it frame by frame, but you could do it in either a low frame rate or within an installation. So that's also a way to move from having it to have to do it frame by frame, 30 frames per second. That's a heavy processing, but you can do it and actually add very much value just doing it every minute or every 10 minutes. So I think that's where we will first see segmentation coming in. Of course,
Actually,
doing instance segmentation for objects, and that's something which we do today. And
yeah.
typically for doing privacy masking, where you mask out the full body of a person, or the face or the head of a person.
Yeah. Yeah, but it reminded me when you said do it at every minute or so. It's similar to the approach that's still being used today, but how when in the beginning we had models for classification coming in where you would do traditional computer vision, foreground background segmentation and tracking, and then just do basically a classification every second or every 5 seconds. But this
Definitely
is
right.
a good approach to have it in an efficient way and still add all the benefits that you have with this new
Yeah.
technology.
So I think I mean those kind of optimizations is something we will continually work on, because I mean we are seeing a limitation in the, at least for edge processing. There is a limitation on what we can do, and we are pushing resolution, we're pushing frame rate as well. So we need to optimize as well. I
I
think the
mean, yeah.
other trend, if we call it like that, is hybrid processing, where we do part of the processing on the edge device and then refine the processing in a server or cloud environment.
Yeah.
That I mean, that's something we've been seeing happen to some extent, but there are sort of system level aspects to that. You need to find sort of standardized interfaces to make the system level work, and managing a system applications running over a system is a bit more complex. So you need tools to manage applications over a system, as well as
Yeah.
cybersecurity problems you could have in those kind of hybrid systems.
Yeah, and in the end, there are only two choices. Either you have a closed system where you control the edge and you control the server, or you have an open system, but then you have the problem of all the different standards
Yep.
and like communication protocols. So it becomes a pretty complex problem.
Yep. But I think we're seeing a maturity in the industry around that, and as well as the trend with cloud processing, cloud storage as well. So gradually we're maturing as an industry, and
Yeah,
that's
it,
promising.
it always surprises me how long it takes to create a new standard until everything is
Definitely.
standardized. But once it is, at least it works and everybody adopts the same standard.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So what? So that's a trend you're saying, hybrids. So can you give us an overview? Otherwise, how is machine learning being used in your opinion nowadays on a broad sense in cameras and in systems? So what kind of what do we do with it today?
So if we talk broadly in surveillance and security, I think there's been a very much focus on the basic stuff like doing object detection,
Mm-hmm.
tracking. That's sort of the fundamental thing. Uh, so far, we haven't seen very much using AI technologies outside of that basic video processing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was with deep learning doing detection and classification, we were able to reach a level of quality in detection and classification, which opened up new possibilities. So we haven't really explored and made use of these technologies in other parts of products. I mean, the number of use cases you can see in doing installation tools, doing design tools, AI will come into all of these tools, and there's so much potential in using AI not only just for video processing but broadly in the security industry.
Mm-hmm. I actually like this concept of what you're saying, video processing, because it really it brings it to a level of, let's say, video decoding or so,
Mm.
that it's so basic that you do it basically on every stream, and on top
Yep,
of this, you can build your applications into more advanced stuff.
definitely.
It's really where we are going right now, where it becomes so commonplace to do deep learning on streams that
Mm.
that this is just the basis for many other things.
And to some extent, I think what has happened because we've been able to work with simple sensors like temperature sensors, switches, etc. That's data. But so
Mm-hmm.
far, we have had problems with video and making video machine understandable. But with the maturity in deep learning, we're now able to generate metadata streams from the video with really good high quality. And that's opening up new use cases where you start to build. We talked about hybrid systems. We are able to build hybrid system in the sense that we integrate video as a source of data together
Mm-hmm.
with other data and build application on that level. So it's a higher level of analysis, and that should open up a multitude of new use cases and possibilities.
So, can you think of any use cases where you combine multiple data sources into one application that
Yeah,
might make
definitely.
sense?
I mean, so we see simple use cases, for example, temperature sensors.
Mm-hmm.
Having a temperature sensor combined with a video could create a new level of understanding. So if we see water in the scene, if it's below zero, then it's most likely ice. So
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of, and then you could trigger, for example, an alert to maintenance to make sure that you clear a footpath or something. So, I mean, when you start to think about adding more sensors, it's simple things, but that could make a clear difference. And typically, where the video material is sometimes has a limitation, just adding a small additional sensor could enable that.
Mm-hmm.
Another good
I,
example of
yeah.
that is where we see radar coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We now start to see radar products complementing video and doing tracking with radar and visual together is a really powerful combination.
Yeah, I think there's even an Axis product out already doing this, right?
So last autumn we released a combined product, and
Mm-hmm.
in that product you use both radar and visual as a sensor to the analytics. So in
It
low
makes a
light
lot of
scenarios, for
sense.
example, you have radar as a complement, or in bad weather situations. So
Yeah, it's interesting because it's always a trade-off you always made with perimeter protection.
yep.
Radar is accurate, but you don't have images to it. Video
Mm.
analytics and cameras is not super accurate, but you have the image. So it really makes sense to combine both. Yeah.
But also sometimes we see that having the visual information as evidence or to help an operator act is crucial. So you could generate the alarm or the trigger based on other senses, but you want the visual confirmation in the same sort of same feed.
Mm. What I sometimes see as a challenge there is that we can bring out new devices that have cool new sensors and so on, but the reality is that the bulk of all cameras out there are old.
Yeah.
So similar to, I don't know, having stereo cameras or lidars or so. It's nice in greenfield installations, but if you really have like legacy systems, you have to work with what you have if you want to use those.
Yeah, to some extent, but I think we start to see a new trend because some of the old legacy installations have really not been used actively. They're just recording and creating evidence if something happens. But with the new analytics, you're able to use the video in a much more efficient way. So we actually see customers requesting more wipers on cameras, for example. And that's a trend that the video material is not only stored, but it's actively used. I think we start with analytics and AI coming into the system of solutions. We are seeing a much more active use of video cameras. That will, of course, drive replacement to have cameras that provide a good video image as well.
Yeah.
So,
And also there's natural evolution of these systems that after 5 to 10 years you start replacing anyway.
of
So the
course.
more camera models support new technology, the more of them we will have out there.
But as you said,
I
I mean, sometimes you're stuck with the video feed you have and doing a
yeah
server-side analytics. Then, I mean, you can't do magic if you don't have the raw material. So
yeah. I looked at the Omdia study from this year, and there they say that in 2027, 80% of the newly sold cameras will have analytics on board.
yep,
And that's very surprising because I always get the impression that all the cameras have analytics on board. So apparently that's not the case. And those are only the newly sold cameras. So 80% of the newly sold cameras, which means there's still so many other cameras out there.
yep,
So it's moving in this direction, but not so fast as I thought.
no. It's sort of a conservative industry, but I think
Yeah.
um, over the last 2 to 3 years, I think the maturity in understanding analytics, understanding concepts like false positives, false negatives,
Mm-hmm.
etc. That is a much higher level of understanding broadly within system integrators, installers in the industry. That's really promising. So,
I think so too. And I also think that it reached a level where end users don't worry so much anymore about this.
no,
I mean, they know it's an issue, but I remember like 10 years ago or so, there was no project without a POC.
no,
Impossible. And nowadays, at least with certain manufacturers, you know that there's a certain kind of quality that you can expect. So you have an expectation that it works, and it does work. So this is also maturity that we reached in recent years.
that's true. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the big topics, obviously, right now in AI is generative AI, more specifically large language models. Yeah, so if this year is the year of large language models, last year was probably the year of other generative AI when we saw Midjourney and deepfakes and all of these kind of things, which of course begs the question, how can we make use of this in the security industry? As you mentioned, we're a conservative industry, so usually it lags behind a little bit. But it would be still interesting to take a look at well, how can this be used? How can large language models be used in security?
Yeah, so it's a very broad topic, and I think one of the areas around this is that the research around transformers broadly is driving a lot of research in many areas. So it's actually pushing the quality levels of things like detection, classification, etc. So that's sort of spilling over to the more traditional analytics. But if we move into more the large language models we see with ChatGPT and all of the like. I think when you start to play with these models, you're of course, you're fascinated with sort of the responses you get, and
Mhm.
you can spend a lot of time just sort of playing with the tools. But at the same time, you start to see the limitations with the tools,
Mhm.
and so I think it's my personal guess is the specific around large language models is sort of on a hype now.
Mhm.
You see so many startups sort of trying to make use of these models. But I think during the next two years, we'll start to see where the real use cases are, where how to navigate around the limitations, because we see hallucinations, we see
Mhm.
limitations in the tools. Um, as we said before, in the security industry, using these tools in a sort of a user interface kind of context, that could be really helpful. But to move them into doing the analysis, and that's a bit more tricky. So typically,
Yeah.
we've done sort of proof of concepts and experiments with the large language models to analyze video and to summarize video. And that's something which we could do to a reasonable level. Then you need to match it with the use cases. If you miss something using these tools, is that okay in a use case? And sometimes for a forensic search use case, it could be okay, but not in a critical use case. So I think we need to be a bit cautious in applying these technologies to fast, and let them mature. Let us understand the limitations and make use of them where they
Yeah.
provide value.
I I haven't used ChatGPT so much, to be honest. I'm not sure. I'm not really. I don't know. For some reason, I'm not really interested. But I have used a lot of other generative AI tools
Yep.
for image generation. For example, there's a new plugin in one of the tools that we use that uses AI. And to be honest, I was surprised how bad the results were.
Yep.
You always see the most perfect images that Midjourney creates, but you usually don't see the steps in between. And
No.
in these tools that I have used, there's still a lot of effort in filtering out what's relevant and what's not relevant. And most recently, I used a new website for text to speech based on the latest AI models.
Yep.
And it's also difficult because you give it a text, it reads the text in a certain way. Then you ask it to regenerate, and then it starts suddenly hallucinating with the same input. It starts
Yeah.
hallucinating and suddenly reads the text in the voice of a child or something.
Yeah.
It's totally unpredictable. So I
So
think like a lot of effort goes into understanding. It's about prompt engineering, of course, but understanding how these models work and finding the right use cases for it. Absolutely what you said. And when you said now about forensic search, I'm also not so sure how much leniency we have for forensic search to miss something, because I used to talk to a lot of end users around forensic search use cases and how they use existing forensic search tools.
yep.
And a lot of them told me, we don't use all these fancy filters. We don't use the hair color. We don't use gender. We don't use age because we know it's not super accurate. So we just say, okay, search for a person and maybe the color, because this way we are sure we're capturing everything. And then we
Yep.
drill down by ourselves, because otherwise we can never be sure if we missed something.
No,
So
I
there's
think
like,
that's true. So
yeah,
sometimes you can build proof of concepts with which shows a fascinating sort of user interface, etc. But when you drill down to the daily work, you really don't save very much in having that fancy interface.
yeah, but
Sometimes just using, I mean, sometimes just scrubbing a video is enough to find what you need. It could be the
yeah,
fastest way to find something. So,
actually, that's a very good point. We might not even need analytics. We just need a fancy UI to find something quickly.
look,
But I mean, I think this is the problem for people like us in the industry that want to set realistic expectations, where you're always competing against trade show features that look fancy and nice but don't work in practice.
no,
So you have to find this balance somehow, because end users, of course, are excited about cool things.
yeah, of course. And I mean, at the same time, I think we will see use cases in, for example, uh, some other type of interfaces, like where you have complex configurations, for example, where you could have sort of those kind of interactive tools to help you define something. What we start to see with um, building small code sequences, etc.
Hmm.
Those kind of, I think actually what will happen over the next couple of years is that we will start to see these tools come into software development to a new level. And from that, we will start to see very simple, or what you sometimes refer to as no-code tools,
Hmm.
which allows a very inexperienced user to do a quite complex integration, for example. So that's an area, I think, where we will see use of these tools. Then
I
the
think so too.
tools
There
needs to
was
be mature, a bit more mature. You need to start to resolve some of the privacy issues around the tools as well, so you can train the tools on your kind of code, etc. That's a few years
yeah.
ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, on the coding area, we have GitHub Copilot, and there was this year, this week, there was a post, I think, by the head of GitHub, where they did a study on how did it change that people worked. And
Yep.
obviously, programming was much faster by using GitHub Copilot, which is essentially an AI that creates code for you. But interestingly, also the code quality went up. So it's
Mm.
not only the speed, but also the quality that goes up. And this is really for hardcore programmers. If this gets simpler
Definitely.
and simpler and gets to normal users,
Mm.
there might be a tons of benefits on how to configure a
Definitely.
system.
And
And yeah,
also, I mean, today it's quite difficult to find experienced programmers. So if we
yeah,
can raise the level of, I mean, new exams programmers to be more efficient, that's really super helpful. Actually, I
yeah,
played
I
around
think
with
so too.
GitHub Copilot last autumn, and I found that some of the struggles you have start to when you start to use new libraries which you haven't used. You need to spend a lot of time to just go through documentation, etc. With
Hmm.
these kind of tools, you get a quick start finding the right function or the right process. So there are sort of being able to grasp large volumes of data and context. That's really helpful. I
Yeah,
think that applies for other areas as well.
yeah. It's a little bit like having an assistant that goes to Stack Overflow for you
Yeah,
to find the things you look.
definitely.
Yeah, and another thing that I find also interesting is where I think in the future will be more and more used to set up your system individually to you. So
Definitely.
it will learn how to use the system. It will do configurations for you automatically if it detects that the camera is maybe upside down or so, and
Yeah.
it will run in the background, so you won't even need to turn it on or so. But
No.
I imagine at one point you just get a notification that says, "Hey, we activate this feature for you."
Yeah.
So
And also, if you have issues, etc., to have an interactive sort of helps or support system running in your system. Ideally, that could be helpful.
yeah, I think so too. It essentially it will be assistance services for the user and for the whole system, and not and for sure not replace anybody, but automate things and make
Yeah,
things easier and make us more efficient.
definitely.
So in the end, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of doing AI right, about
Mm.
responsible AI and all the AI
Mm.
regulation that is out there. So, in your opinion, what do manufacturers that use AI need to do to make sure that we, of course, adhere to the all the regulations, but also to do just the right thing that's morally right? So, what do
Mm.
we as the manufacturers need to do?
So I've been following quite closely the AI Act coming out in the Europe.
Hmm.
I think that there's much good intentions in that sort of legislation. and to large extent, it's a balanced proposal. I think the things which were pushed into the legislation around generative AI quite hastily will need to mature a bit. But in all, I think we see having these kind of legislations coming into the use of AI in various type of applications is very helpful, and there's initiatives in the US roughly with the same sort of intention. So, of course, the problem with that is that it takes time. It takes time both for the legislation to be formed, but also the application of the legislation. So I think what is being pushed now is sort of trying to understand the consequences, and I think we as an industry we need to be ahead of this. We need to understand that it's not about following the legislation to the point, but it's looking beyond that to look at the intention of the legislation and try to build systems which adhere to the intention in the legislation. This is, for example, when we work with data in some of the applications, to be very mindful of biases in data and in the application, and to look at the consequences of when we apply, and this is not only deep learning based or large language models, it's when we apply automation to use cases, we need to look at the consequences. What are the risks involved in doing an automation, and how do we prevent sort of bad behaviors or catastrophic scenarios? Of course, sometimes bringing a human in the loop or in the decision process is helpful, but you need to make sure that the information the human gets in that, or the operator gets, is sort of relevant in that case, so that you really look through the use case and analyze the risks.
I really like your point on looking at the intention of the regulation and going beyond it, because just the speed of lawmaking is just way too slow for this kind of technology.
Definitely.
So it's really up to us to have this speed. I would even go a little bit beyond it and not only look at regulation and the intention of the regulation, but also that to look at what is just morally right. So what is the right thing to do essentially? And yes, part of the output is to adhere to the regulation. Of course, we need to do that, but it's only part of it. Like there might be many things that go beyond it that where the regulation hasn't thought about it, but we see a need that actually it's important to take care of certain things and certain new applications that are coming up.
I think part of this is having a very active ethical discussion, both within companies. So we tend to drive an internal discussion, which is equally as important as the external discussion we have with engineers and having an internal debate. But our philosophy is focused on that. We should have a sort of a freedom to explore technologies, to understand the technologies, and then take a decision and analyze what kind of use cases we apply the technology to. It's not the technology as such, but it's what kind of use cases and where you apply the technology, which is crucial.
And I think this is also what the AI Act got right. They're not regulating technology, they're not regulating innovation, but really the applications.
Definitely.
So we are not limiting innovation, how we advance the field.
Yeah, and actually the AI Act is opening up some of the possibilities for innovation, which was sometimes a bit pushed back by the GDPR legislation. So that's a step in the right direction, I think. And then, of course, I mean, we need to have an open discussion in the ecosystem. It's partners. So we as manufacturers of applications and solutions has one role. But it's equally important that the system integrators deploying solutions are equally active in this. So it's a sort of a collaboration in this.
Yeah. In this whole concept of responsible AI, one thing that I'm really interested in practice and how to implement it and what's the use case is explainable AI.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinion on how explainable AI could be used in practice, and in which cases does it make sense, and maybe which cases doesn't it make sense?
So, I mean, explainable AI is a very broad field. The simple areas around understanding bias, etc. That's I think we are able to work with the simple detection models, etc., to
Hmm.
test out things in a reasonable way. But when we move into the large language models, I think that's where explainable AI is tricky to be
Hmm.
able to predict the results from these large models. It's quite impossible today. So I think that's part of why I believe that the generative AIs and the large language models is at the hype, because
Hmm.
today we don't really have the tools um, and I know all of the research pushed into trying to filter out and train the models to be ethically correct, etc. But we are still struggling with that, and to have an explainable sort of analysis of these large models, it's really an unsolved problem today. I think that is partly why I believe that the maturity of the large language models will take time. Of course, I think it's been a good thing to push out ChatGPT, etc., to raise the discussion and start to look at the consequences. But until we are able to use the models very broadly, there will be a sort of the need for more tools to make the models more consistent, and
Yeah.
so it's a
Yeah. So
tricky area, definitely.
yeah. We don't even understand exactly what they do. So
No,
um, making it predictable is even more impossible.
but
It's
at the
really
same time, for the simple models, the models we do detections, etc. I mean, there's not very much difference between the deep learning models and the more traditional computer vision models or
Mhm.
algorithms. Because the only way you can predict those models is actually to test them in some
Yeah.
ways. So that's the way we treated it before, and we can still do that for some of the smaller sort of areas. But when we move into larger models where you have more sort of more unpredictable results, then it becomes much more tricky.
Yeah. So before we sign off, can you maybe give us an outlook? So where do you think we're going in the security industry with AI? So what are the upcoming things? You already gave us a little bit of an idea, but what's not only with your team, but as an industry as a whole,
Mm.
where do you think we're going with AI right now?
So actually, I think it's a very broad question.
Very
um,
broad question.
no, but I think we're at a really interesting spot because uh, analytics has been with us for quite some time in the security industry. But
Mm.
with the latest sort of discussions around AI, we are seeing a much more renewed interest. And I think what we are starting to see is a combination of that cybersecurity is maturing, which is a foundation to be able to build larger systems, integrated
Mhm.
systems. So we're moving away from the closed down system, providing much more integration into to dashboards, etc. That will open up a lot of new use cases. So I think AI is part of driving this maturity, and the fascination you see with these sort of a bit hyped examples that will sort of spur innovation in the industry.
Mhm.
So we're starting to see new startups and new players coming out with quite new interesting ideas of what you could do. That's moving a bit beyond the more traditional security use cases, adding on to that and creating more values in actually for system integrators to be able to build systems which creates more value for the end customer. So value creation through the chain is becoming. Um, there are more opportunities for creating value through the chain using these AI technologies. I think that's what I'm starting to feel is happening, and that's really promising because from a technical point of view, we have known that this was possible to do, but you need the ecosystem to work together and the maturity in the ecosystem. And we're getting to that point.
Yeah, I have the same feeling where like we as an industry are like maturing and growing up and learn how to integrate and work together. And yeah, on with Profile M was a big step, but there's so many other things happening at the same time
Definitely.
where systems learn how to collaborate and really provide the value we can when in our previous silos and working together. I find this exciting as well.
Definitely. So we're
Okay.
at the right time in the right industry. It's quite exciting.
I think so too. I really think so too. We had so many hype cycles in the past in this industry, and each of them had their place and their reason. But right now, it is really, really exciting on where we are going, where many things for the first time ever become possible, and maybe we're moving there where maybe people outside of our industry thought we are 15 years ago. So
Start
it's very
start
exciting.
delivering on that. Yeah.
Yes,
That's true.
exactly. We have to deliver on CSI and the 24 and all these
Yeah.
series. Enhance that. Okay, cool. So that's a very good ending and a very positive outlook for the future. Thank you, Mats, for this conversation. It has been very enlightening and interesting. And as always, yeah, thank you for coming. It has been
Thank
great.
you. As always, it's super interesting and creative. So I really enjoy these sessions.
Cool. Well, let's
Cool.
do it again in the future. Thank
Will
you.
do.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.